Look at this. Every single week, we're told there's no money. No money for youth services. No money for community centers. No money for mental health support. No money for fixing roads. No money for social programs. No money for struggling families. No money for food insecurity. No money for the things ordinary people see collapsing right in front of their eyes. And then suddenly, 1.2 billion appears, like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a treasury hat. The government has announced a major package of investment for the creative industries as part of its wider industrial strategy, presenting it as a growth sector for the British economy. And immediately I found myself asking the same question millions of taxpayers are probably asking: where exactly was this money hiding yesterday? Wait, it gets worse. Because this isn't happening in a country that's thriving. This is happening in a country where people can barely drive 50 meters without meeting a pothole. A country where many youth clubs have vanished. A country where local authorities have repeatedly cut youth services. A country where food insecurity affects hundreds of thousands of children. A country where social workers, teachers, charities, and parents keep warning that vulnerable children are falling through the cracks. Yet somehow Whitehall keeps discovering billions whenever a shiny strategic announcement arrives. The Great British Money Mirage. This is what fascinates me. Government finances increasingly resemble a magic trick for ordinary people. Sorry, budget constraints. For major announcements, good news, we found another billion. How? Where? Under whose sofa cushions? Because taxpayers are constantly told resources are limited. Then a press conference happens and suddenly the money tree blossoms again. The pothole test. Here's my simple philosophical test. Before announcing another £1 billion initiative, politicians should be required to drive through Britain for 3 hours, not Westminster. Britain, actual Britain, the Britain people live in, the Britain with broken roads, neglected estates, disappearing community spaces, overstretched local services. Then ask them, do you still think this is the highest priority? The youth club extinction event. This is the part that annoys me most because every politician loves talking about young people. Every politician loves talking about opportunity. Every politician loves talking about potential. Yet youth services across England have been devastated over the past decade and a half. Research published this week highlighted the loss of youth spaces and community opportunities for young people alongside huge reductions in youth service spending. And honestly, you cannot spend years dismantling the spaces that keep young people connected and then act shocked when loneliness, disengagement, and social problems increase. The government's argument. Now let's be fair, because there is an argument for this investment. The government believes the creative industries create jobs, generate exports, attract investment, support economic growth. And to be fair, Britain's creative sector is genuinely world class. Music, film, television, gaming, design. The sector contributes billions to the economy. That's the government's case, and it isn't irrational. But here's the problem: people don't experience GDP, people experience reality. Nobody walks outside and says, the creative sector's export performance has improved my pothole. Nobody says, my local youth center closed. But at least macroeconomic growth projections are encouraging. People judge governments through lived experience, not treasury spreadsheets. The disconnect is becoming dangerous. This is where I think politicians keep misreading the country. They think people are angry about numbers. They're not. They're angry about priorities. That is a completely different thing. A parent watching food prices rise, services disappear, local facilities close is not thinking about industrial strategy. They're thinking, why can't you fix what's already broken? The child at the center of the story. Let's bring this back to something simple. Imagine a child, not a statistic, not a report, an actual child. That child may be hungry, isolated, dealing with abuse, struggling with mental health, living in poverty. Now ask, what improves that child's life first? Another £1 billion strategy document or functioning local support systems? That is the question many people are asking. Britain has a trust problem. And honestly, this is bigger than this specific investment. The real issue is trust. Every time government says we can't afford that, then immediately finds billions for something else. Public trust takes another hit because people start believing the issue isn't money, the issue is priorities. The elite view versus the street view from Westminster. This looks like economic planning from the street. It often looks like neglect with better branding, and that perception matters politically because perception becomes reality when enough voters share it. The pattern people keep seeing. This is why these announcements generate such strong reactions. People see a pattern. The roads deteriorate, the services shrink, the waiting lists grow, the community infrastructure weakens. Then billions appear for something else, and ordinary people increasingly conclude there is always money, just not for us. Whether that's fair or unfair, that perception is spreading. The government will argue this investment creates jobs, boosts growth, and strengthens one of Britain's most successful industries. Fair enough, that's their argument. But here's the problem. Politics isn't only about economics, it's about priorities, and priorities communicate values. Because when people see potholes everywhere, youth services disappearing, struggling families, food insecurity, overstretched communities, and then hear the words, we found another 1.2 billion. They naturally ask, why wasn't that urgency applied to the problems already tearing communities apart? And honestly, that's the question I keep coming back to. Not whether the creative industries matter. They do. Not whether investment matters. It does. The question is, how has Britain reached a point where billions can be mobilized for strategic growth initiatives, while so many citizens feel their immediate reality is being left to crumble? Because eventually voters stop asking whether government is spending money and start asking who is government spending it for? And once a country starts asking that question en masse, politicians should get very nervous